Today, I have a very exciting video for you. I have an interview with Tim Wilmot. He's a fantastic artist and instructor from the UK. And today we have a great discussion about watercolor. What are the things that really catch your eye? You're like, I've got to paint this scene.
The lights and darks. I love sunny scenes, shadows, shapes, the high range of contrast in a painting. I love it.
So I hope you enjoy this interview with Tim Wilmot.
I've been painting in watercolor my whole life, really, from the age of 4. So it's a thing I've always done. Admittedly, some years more than others. I would say about 2009, I got into watercolor again more actively. Before then, it'd just been really sort of for sketching, maybe on a holiday, taking a sketchbook on holiday, doing the odd sort of watercolor now and again, but actively from 2009 onwards.
What is it about watercolor specifically that excites you?
I haven't really dabbled too much in oil or acrylic. You think, well, I started painting watercolor at 4. Surely I must have had exposure to other painting mediums, but no. I just stuck with watercolor, so I really don't know a lot else other than watercolor. I love the spontaneity of watercolor, the fact that you can produce a painting in a short space of time. The vibrancy of watercolors. When I'm doing plein air painting, I think it's a convenient painting medium. You have minimal equipment to take with you to carry. Yeah, it's a lovely medium. I think it's the true painting medium. I feel when I look at say when I go to exhibitions and there's a plethora of oil painting and mixed media, and watercolor is just like a sort of small minority. I think it's a shame, really, because for me, it is the true painting medium. Doesn't take any prisoners, as we know. If you make a mistake, you can't easily correct it. But I love it, and I would probably never ever get to master it. But it's just a challenge of being presented with different subjects to paint. As you know, Matt, I generally paint landscapes, seascapes, street scenes, that sort of thing. I don't do still life or portraits, but every scene is different, and I just love the challenge of trying to look at a scene and thinking, what watercolor techniques can I use to deploy to try and replicate the impression of that scene. Yeah, I love it.
Your work is so sound as far as like values and large shapes and things like that. But you also have a wonderful looseness to your painting. Is that something that did you always paint that way, or did you kind of feel like that's something that developed over time?
It definitely developed over time. If you just see my work for my teenage years, it was all quite tight and trying to replicate exactly what I saw. But it's definitely got looser over the years. And yes, I love with watercolor, playing on those contrasts, trying to emphasize the light and the dark, the contrast between the light values and the dark values, putting them close up to each other as well, using the appropriate sort of brush to get good brush marks, which I love in watercolor. The appearance of those brush marks, whatever they be, dry brush marks, and so on. So getting the edges right. Yeah, it's definitely going a little bit looser probably as time goes on. Possibly a little bit more abstract. Maybe emphasized by the fact that I try and limit myself. I've got a short attention span, and I'm not the sort of person that could spend hours doing a painting. I want to try and capture that scene in maybe an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours tops. Anything more than that, then I just as I say, my concentration wanders, and it's not my thing.
Yeah, I think that is a great characteristic of watercolor. I hear, oil painters that take, multiple days or even, weeks to work on a piece. And I didn't realize this about myself when I first dove into it, but I don't have the patience to stick with the same subject for that long.
Life's too short. There's so many subjects out there to
That's
paint.
right.
I can remember I was at an international watercolor, an IWS event, international event. And I was talking to one of the American artists who's into these really sort of photorealistic paintings. They're absolutely fantastic, still lifes. I shan't mention his name, but I was intrigued by his patience in trying to depict the still life scene. And I asked him, well, how long does it take you typically to paint one of your paintings? And he said, well, 60 hours. And I said, well, aren't you bored? Do you not get tired trying to depict the scene or the subject in 60 hours? And he said, well, it's just like trying to climb a mountain. It's just there in front of me. I just got to do it. But that's not my scene. I really envy those people that can do these, and there are quite a few of them around, American artists, Chinese artists that paint really, as I say, photorealistic scenes. That's not me. I just don't have the patience for that. I like to, as I say, try and do something quickly in an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, and create the impression of that scene, and then go off and do something else.
If you had to start over tomorrow, now that you have this knowledge of watercolor painting, what are the things that you would really hone in and focus on to see the greatest amount of progress?
That's a really tough question.
We're going to get right back to the Tim Wilmot interview in just a minute, but I wanted to let you know that if you are a watercolor artist that's looking to take your next big step forward, I have a free video lesson for you. The 7 Secrets of Fresh and Powerful Painting. Now, in this video lesson, I talk about how to plan out your painting, how to mindfully paint your scene, and most importantly, how to put your brush down before you overwork your painting. Along with this video lesson, I send you a pre-painting checklist, something that you can have in your hand before you start each and every painting. And this checklist is going to help you ensure that you are thinking through the right things before you get started. Now, in addition to that, if you have questions about paper, pigments, or brushes, I also send you my watercolor supplies guide. So if you're ready to take the next step in your painting, take a look at my free video lesson. All right, back to the interview with Tim Wilmot.
I would say if I was starting out afresh, I would do my research. So use the web, use YouTube to try and find those watercolor painters that you have some association with, you like their style, and then try and home in on their techniques, maybe take classes, get some kind of initial instruction in that particular style. But there are so many different types of watercolor painters out there. I think it's a case of trying to sort of home in on the style that you've got some affinity with, that you've got some, you relate to, rather than trying to paint everything. I do see some painters that they try and do too many different styles of painting and too many different types of subjects. Maybe it'd be good just to, if you're starting out, just home in on a particular style and follow those artists that you love, and you want to try and emulate their style, and just kind of take just an element of each artist and try and make it your own. Just try and develop your style over the coming months, years, or whatever.
Yeah, that's good advice, because especially this day and age, there's just so much out there, and I think a lot of students get pulled in so many directions. and they end up not knowing what to focus on. Or, this artist might, focus on these, certain principles that might not align with this other artist. So that's something that's challenging, but it's also interesting to see that there are so many different approaches, and, there aren't a ton of black and white rules that you just have to follow or it's not going to work out. So, I paint from light to dark. There are other artists that prefer to paint the opposite way, so that's interesting.
Yeah, and they do really well. But it's down to their experience with painting dark to light. They just know what they're doing. Maybe they don't do an initial drawing, but they just go, directly paint that subject. But I'm like you. I'm light to dark, which is the traditional way of doing it. And yes, I think beginners should. Going back to your question, I think beginners should just try and take things easy. Not expect too much from watercolor. If you are starting off with watercolor, you are starting off with one of the more difficult mediums, but the most rewarding, I would say, being a bit prejudiced. And stick with it and just try and follow and study the painters that you love.
When you are looking at a subject to paint, what are the things that really catch your eye that makes you're like, I've got to paint this scene? What are those things for you?
I think it would be trying to, and it's a bit of intuition, trying to think what would adapt itself to watercolor, first of all. Secondly, is it interesting? Do I have some kind of a connection with what I'm painting? I love painting things that I'm familiar with, maybe a place I've been to or a similar scene that I might have painted before. So there is that element to it. Trying to find, well, of course, a focal point, but there could be more than one focal point. And sometimes paintings won't have a focal point. I've seen some really good watercolor paintings that have no focal point whatsoever. But generally speaking, a focal point. The lights and darks. I love sunny scenes, shadows, shapes of shadows. So that high value, the high range of contrast in a painting, light into dark, exploring other watercolor techniques. So maybe edges that we could utilize in a watercolor painting. Could there be a nice balance of soft edges and hard edges? So those are the guiding principles, but mostly it is down to a connection with a scene. So, as I say, a place I've been to, or something I'm familiar with, or a similar subject I might have painted before. It's always really difficult for me to paint something. If someone just gave me a scene right now, or a photograph or a commission, I always find those really difficult to do because I just don't have that connection.
I agree. I feel the same way. Something that really attracted me to your work, we have a lot of similar interests in subject matter. I love light and shadow. It's what makes me take the photo and create the painting or paint it on scene. I really like I like all of your subjects, but your urban scenes or your street scenes with cars and shadows and movement and people, those are the things I really enjoy and enjoy painting myself too. So I resonate a lot with a lot of your subject matter.
Yeah, I think we've got similar painting subject interests there, Matt. I've seen some of your stuff, and I think we're on the same page there with the street scenes and the light against the dark, and windscreens catching the light against the background. There are so many things in a street scene that you can exploit to emphasize those contrasts. I prefer actually seascapes, to be honest with you. Although I love doing the street scenes, but I love doing the seascapes, harbor scenes particularly. That's the one I like the best. But again, you're looking at light against the dark, a light boat against a darker background, or a dark boat against a lighter background, so on.
Do you have Some artists that you really looked up to along the way in your learning, or some artists that you really admire that you've been able to learn with?
Contemporary artists would be the normal suspects like Alvaro, Joseph, UK side, John Yardley, those that have sadly passed away. On the US side, John Pike, Claude Buckle in the UK. They're all kind of loose painters, I would say, and landscape painters predominantly. So Russell Flint as well in the UK. Again, sadly passed.
Cool.
Probably similar to yourself.
Yeah. A few of those I'm unfamiliar with. I'll have to look them up and check them out. Do you get outside very often, or do you mainly paint in studio, or how does that work out for you?
I don't often have the chance to do plein air painting. I do have a full-time job, nothing to do with art. So art is not my profession. But when I do have the chance, plein air painting is fantastic. I do a number of workshops through the year where or I don't like using the word workshop, but prefer to use the word painting holiday, but where I am the tutor on a painting holiday. And that is normally a week of plein air painting, normally a couple of paintings a day. And that's a fantastic experience to be exploring different places and painting different scenes. In the UK, I love to get out as much as I can during the summer with a couple of painting groups I'm a member of. And we go to various locations around the southwest of the UK, typically little villages, lovely, pretty sort of UK villages, and painting cottages or rural scenes. But I love it. You can't beat it, really, as the ultimate painting experience. You're out in the fresh air, you're doing something you enjoy. Invariably, you're with other people, so there's the sort of social aspect of it as well, and having a little bit of a natter and doing a bit of critiquing of each other when you've done your work. Can't beat it.
Someone is interested in learning with you. Where would you direct them?
I've got my YouTube channel. I do also run online workshops via the Crowdcast platform. It's like a sort of streaming event platform, crowdcast.io. So you can find me there, crowdcast.io / Tim Wilmot again, just like YouTube. Thirdly, I've got a little Patreon club going. In there, we have about 250 members, and they're watercolor painters of all different levels, some really, really top class watercolor painters and some beginners, but we're all in it together and sharing knowledge and experience. We do monthly projects, a couple of online meetups every month as well. So that's quite an active thing going on to help you develop watercolor. What else? Oh, I've mentioned my painting holidays as well. If people want to venture further afield and travel internationally, then you might be tempted to come along to an overseas painting trip.
I might have to jump on that myself. That sounds fun.
There's a brilliant one down in Mexico, Matt.
Oh,
I'm not sure when you're going to edit this or it's going to be published, but there's.
I'll put all those links down in the description of the video as well if people want to connect with you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention about your art or watercolor in general, or anything else you'd like to say?
I would say with watercolor, don't take it too seriously. Enjoy it. 99.99% of us aren't going to be the top masters of this world, but let's just enjoy it and share our knowledge, share our experiences, and enjoy the journey.
I think that's a great approach. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was so nice to chat with you and meet you, and I appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, Matt, we'll have to swap sides. I'll have to interview you.
Yeah,
And
sure. I'd love to.
we'll have to do a few more collaborations or something like
Yeah.
that via YouTube or whatever.
Yeah. Sounds good. If you are looking to take the next step in your painting, I have a free video lesson for you. The 7 Secrets of Fresh and Powerful Painting. Now in this video lesson, I talk about how to plan your painting, how to mindfully paint your scene, and most importantly, how to put down the brush before you overwork your painting. Now, when you sign up for this video lesson, I also send you a pre-painting checklist. Now, this is something that you can hang on to and look at before each one of your paintings. And it's going to ensure that you're thinking through the right things and that you're on track when you start your painting. Now, in addition to that, I include my watercolor supplies guide. So if you have questions about my brushes, pigments, paper, things that I use, then check out my watercolor supplies guide. Now it's simple to get started with this. All you have to do is follow this link right here to get to the 7 secrets of fresh and powerful painting. I'll see you there.